rationing. And the Screen magazine, in its second issue, tried to explain to me.
Hello, my name is Dean Contover, and this is the History Show. Thank you for watching. This is number 2 in regards to interviewing Richard Lawrence Greene. He was a helicopter in Vietnam. He was a lieutenant while he was in Vietnam. So basically, we're going to jump right to Vietnam because that's where we left off in the other show. So he was eventually, you didn't retire, you left as a captain, right?
I completed my term of service, yes.
Completed your term of service. I'm sorry. He graduated from the University of Massachusetts in 1965, became a second lieutenant, went to helicopter school in Texas, in Alabama, and after that, after a year of training, he was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Unit. He was with the 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry of the 1st Division.
1st Infantry.
1st Infantry Division.
I never really met up with the 1st Cavalry.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
I was assigned, and then
the 4th Cavalry of the 1st Division, 1st Infantry Division.
Yeah.
Clarification.
It's always complex.
Yeah, it is. It's terminology. That was the big red one, as they
exactly
call it, right? So he was a helicopter pilot. Where were you stationed out of? What was your base camp?
The base was at Phu Loy, which is, I'll say, 20 miles north of Saigon.
Okay.
Pretty close to Xi'an, which was the division headquarters, 1st Division.
Okay, the 1st Division headquarters. I think they were one of the first divisions in the country, right?
Yeah, they went over by boat a year before I got there.
Interesting. So in the unit, you explained there's different platoons. Let's do it again because this is the second show.
Okay. Well, the 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry, had several platoons. I was in the Scout platoon, Callsign Outcast. There was a lift platoon for our aero rifle platoon. The aero rifle platoon were the guys in the ship that got out, and in case there was something that had to be done on the ground. But the guys who carried them were the Clowns, Huey helicopters, and then we had Huey gunships. The Mustangs was that platoon. And as I said, there was an aero rifle platoon, and there was also a long-range recon patrol platoon.
Did you deal with them at all? Or what they call LRPs in Vietnam?
Yeah, we didn't do too much with the LRPs, but the aero rifle platoon was in on a lot of the things we were working on.
I think we have a picture of the helicopter that you flew. It's a one-man pilot with a sort of whoever's riding with you.
Right.
It was like there's a picture of it on the ground. It kind of hard landing, as you said, but that's the type of pilot.
The plane, yes.
Yeah, when I was younger, the traffic helicopters looked like that, didn't they? Because they had visibility, you know, not 360, but
a lot of visibility. And if you peek your head out and turn to the rear, it's almost 360.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about flying at nighttime in bad weather. How does that affect you in regards to flying a small helicopter like
nighttime could be very bad because there weren't many lights north of Saigon. Once you got up into the boonies, there was hardly anything for lights. And if you had an overcast sky and things like that, it could be definitely very rough. So we tried to avoid that if at all possible.
So if you did a night flying, you didn't fly with lights on?
Well, we flew with the lights on.
Lights on, you did fly?
Yeah.
All the time? Or?
That being the rotating beacon and so forth.
Right. So you did fly. There was never a time where you did not fly with lights?
I don't think so. We usually flew at altitude if we flew at night.
Okay.
So we weren't in much danger from ground fire.
Right.
We never really knew how much danger we were in, because if somebody fired at you from the ground, you never knew unless you saw a tracer, because you couldn't hear the rounds up that high.
Right, right. So a tracer is every 5th round, you see a tracer, and it gives you more or less direction of where it's shooting.
Where the arc of the trajectory
is coming from.
Yeah.
Right. Did you see tracers at times?
Occasionally, yeah.
Occasionally, right.
Yeah.
You avoided them.
Yeah, you added a little extra altitude when you saw
altitude.
something like that coming up your way.
What was your armament? In the other show, you said your armament was just your M16.
Well, basically, we just had personal armament. On one of our planes, we mounted an M60 machine gun on the skid, which sort of adversely affected the weights and balance.
I see.
But,
yeah, that's what you have to worry about in the helicopter.
Yeah, but it seemed to work okay. Sometimes the door gunner would carry an M60 machine gun, but usually he was carrying an M16, and we carried smoke grenades to mark targets. We carried some hand grenades to drop, which was not the smartest idea, but what we did.
Tell me that story in regards to you came up upon a situation where you were throwing hand grenades out the helicopter.
This was not a unique situation, but the way it devolved, it was pretty unique.
All right.
We're over a bomb damage assessment. B-52s had gone in there about an hour or two before the place was still smoking.
Did you visually see them dropping the bombs when you were
they
off
they
to the
always
side?
made a great point to keep us away.
Okay.
So
There may be a mistake, so they were.
yeah, right, and or we might make a mistake.
mistake, right.
Yeah. So anyway, there was still a little bit of smoke coming up in places from that, and it was believed to be a North Vietnamese division that was the
Headquarters?
target.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in War Zone C, and we found the bomb damage assessment site with no problem based on the rising smoke and so forth. But then we started to find structures on the ground that were still
Visually from your helicopter.
intact. We could see, like, there's a hooch there. Oh, there's something under that. Oh, yeah, that's another thatch roof right there, and that the sort of thing you would see. There were tall trees there. And I was flying with an intelligence officer, and he had not set up properly. He had not laid on the schedule for the bomb damage assessment. And so I said, well, we don't normally fly things like that by ourselves, but I'll call another plane, and he can cover us, and then we can do that. And that was fine by him. So that's what we did. And then when we started to see these structures down there, I said, well, we could drop a grenade and see if we
How low were you flying?
We were flying at treetop level, but they were big trees. In this particular area.
jungle, okay.
And so we'd I'd set up and be ready, and he would wait until we were over the target, and then the forward aircraft speed would carry the grenade beyond what he was trying to drop it on. So
That makes sense, yeah.
I said, well, let me tell you when to throw. So we headed in on this other run, and I said, throw now. Well, he had the grenade in the wrong hand. He didn't have it in his right hand ready to drop on the...
Right,
So-
out the window.
Yeah. So he cross-armed it from his left hand, and the grenade
He didn't play baseball, did he? Obvious.
the grenade hit the door jamb and bounced down inside what they call the chin bubble, the very front of the bubble where it comes down to the structure. And I couldn't see it because the instrument panel was in my way. Apparently he could see it, and I just yelled out to him, get it. And he just moved forward and came up with it, and it went out the door, and moments later, there was the blast that we heard. We didn't get hit by any of it.
No shrapnel or anything?
No, but our other plane said, hey, you got an airburst. And I said, yeah, we know. It almost went off in the cockpit.
Wow.
And we were just flabbergasted by the whole experience and somehow lost interest in that bomb damage assessment. and I was in the unfortunate position of having to go back to my unit and explain the whole story because the door jamb, the grenade hit more on the side of the bubble and had cracked the bubble in a big arc. And so I had to go back with a broken bubble, broken by a grenade that had been in the cockpit. So that was.
So the intelligence officer, what happened to him?
He the word got around, I understand, in the division headquarters of what had happened, and he was just shaking his head. He just blowing out exhalations of air, and we were both that way, sort of hyperventilating after the whole thing.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a 6-second shelf life on that
Or less,
grenade.
yeah. Yeah, I used to figure it was about 5 or something.
I think they told us 6 or something like that. Once the spoon is popped and stuff like that. Holy moly!
Yeah.
You know, that was a real close one.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can laugh about it now, but I don't think you were laughing about it then.
Not that day.
Not that day, yeah, definitely. So, did you tell them what happened when you got back?
Yeah, I had
and
no
briefed?
choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just said, here's what happened. We dropping grenades, and he crossed-armed one, and that was the story.
Did you use your M16s at all?
Well, I didn't use the M16 because I was
Piloting.
Yeah, my hands were full.
Right.
But our gunner, who was usually one of the crew chiefs or the crew chief for that plane, he would use his. Sometimes it was just reconnaissance by fire into a bush that looked suspicious or something like that.
Right.
We did, on occasion, in War Zone D, we found parked trucks in the bushes.
Huh.
And it was clear. You could follow the trails, you know, and you could, if there had been a rain the night before and you see all these truck tracks, you knew those are pretty fresh truck tracks.
Right.
And there were trucks that were parked with apparently bags of rice. And they were hardly visible. They were very well camouflaged, but it didn't take much, you know, to see something out of order.
Well, after a while, you had a good eye.
Yeah.
You know.
And so in a case like that, we might ask our gunner to put some rounds into the truck, and then eventually there would be more activity.
To save the rice? Well, I mean, rice is very important, and if you could slow down the rice getting to the troops, I mean,
right. They say an army marches on its stomach, and if you can take the rice away,
that was a big factor in the area that I was in regards to preventing rice being grown and the bad guys getting the rice.
Yeah.
So that's important to strategically stop it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's interesting. Anything else that you want to tell us that was a close call?
Well, there were occasions we would fly low level and circle over an object of interest. And if there was a strong wind, you would have a tailwind in one direction and a headwind in the other direction. And with the tailwind, you tended to lose lift. But with the headwind, you tended to buoy up. And there were times when going around in a circle and you're almost sinking to the trees and you're very close and you've come around just far enough that you hit the headwind and you're buoyed up. So there was a lot of that funny stuff that went on.
I see. What about flying in the rain?
Well, you tried to avoid the rain, I mean, as much as you could.
If you did get caught in the rain?
Well, sometimes you could see the cells, the thunderstorms.
Oh, okay, that's right.
And you could fly to one side or another
Right.
and miss some of that. I had one incident where a major who was the different operations officer, and it was raining cats and dogs. And he came out to me and he said, "Well, let's go." And you know, I'm thinking a duck couldn't fly in this weather. You know, it was that bad.
That's a good analogy.
And but I had remembered somebody had always said, always attempt the mission. That way you wouldn't be derelict, you know. So I lit the fire and got the plane going and everything, and we take off, and I went up about 30 or 40 feet, circled around, and came back and landed in the same mud hole and said, "Sir, this weather is unflyable. not safely flyable.
Did you have windshield wipers on your?
No.
No. So.
Yeah, if there was light rain, the rain would bead over the
Right.
the plexi.
Yeah, there's certain chemical that you could put on.
Well, I think it was the nature of water versus
Oh,
plexiglass.
I
It just
see,
sort
yeah.
of beaded and ran
I
back.
see.
And then this major then went on to call another officer who was up and said to him, 4, this is 3. This weather is unflyable. Land immediately. And the message came back, yes, sir, we're already on the ground. But what would happen is typically in the monsoon season, you'd have a low ceiling. And if people were flying low level, they would get compressed into the same altitude so that they were all, 100 feet off the ground, and in great danger of mid-air collision.
Yeah, that's another thing also, that mid-air collisions can happen.
Yeah.
And did happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had jets come by me, and I was sure they were just trying to give me a scare because they came by so close, fighters.
And they're loud. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can hear them when your rotors are rotating.
Yeah,
you can hear the jets.
hear them over there. Yeah.
Yeah, over that.
Something goes by.
So there's another thing that you didn't talk about in regards to artillery. You have to be careful in regards to flying into artillery.
Yes.
We talked about B-52s, but artillery is another thing that you have to worry about, because if they're firing artillery into a position and you fly by, you're going to be hit.
Right. Well, there's a certain amount of fatalism that goes with it, because the ideal situation, pilot, co-pilot, one guy marking the artillery, but when you're on your own like that, you can't really do it so well. And on this one occasion, which was a night flight, and I would call in for the artillery briefing, and the artillery briefing went on, it seemed like, for 5 minutes, describing the different locations of guns and which coordinates they were firing into. And I had no way of plotting all that. And there was an expression, high diddle diddle, right up the middle, just cross your fingers.
Right, yeah.
And that was a night flight too, which was difficult for other reasons, because our troops had failed to bring papers back to Division Intelligence, which were captured documents that they wanted to bring back to Division Intelligence. And so I had been sent up there to pick up these papers. And I had, I think it was the Aero Rifle Platoon commander who had made the mistake. He came with me and, would fly along in the darkness, and then occasionally there'd be this airburst that would go on a couple of miles away, And then I had to land in the Iron Triangle on an unimproved site. There was no runway there. There was only 4 little, almost flashlight strength lights and huge trees in the vicinity. And that was a scary landing, to come into something like that.
Right.
And he ran in.
You'd have a rough landing, I mean, yeah.
He got a bunch of papers and came back, a bag of papers, and then off we went again and had to do the same thing in reverse.
Right.
Through all the artillery once
Right.
again. Yeah. And come to find out, when I got back, our operations people were standing around the radio waiting to hear, because they were so worried about us out in a 2-seat observation helicopter with no instruments. It didn't have a RMI, radio magnetic indicator, or artificial horizon or anything.
You were a good helicopter pilot. Your family doesn't know it, but they'll know it now after they watch.
So anyway, that was quite a...
You were in an operation, I don't know if there's a map, we have a map up, that you were in Operation Junction City, where there was an airborne drop,
Yes.
combat jump by the 173rd Airborne Brigade.
Yeah, and that was...
What's the true story about that?
Well,
Was that a piece of cake?
They had relatively little problems in their jump, but I heard from my division intelligence people who would be frequently riding next to me in the season, oh yeah, I was in on that meeting. The only reason they did that, the first paratroop drop since the Korean War, was to save umpty-ump slicks, troop transports, for umpty-ump hours, like 40 slicks for 3 hours or something. So instead they decided to drop the paratroopers in and save the capacity for those slicks to bring in people that way.
Right.
So this intelligence officer said, oh, I know my airborne people are going to be talking about that. And
they're still talking about that today. It's the only combat jump they had in Vietnam.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I guess so. Wasn't aware that that
that was the only official.
Yeah, and subsequent to that, I landed somebody there at the LZ. This may have been the next day or day or two after. And I was on the ground, and some NCO came over to me and said, oh, you got to get out of here. There's going to be a heavy drop. Well, I didn't know anything about heavy drops, but it didn't sound like the thing I wanted to be at the bottom of. So, so I went up and flew around, and they had C-123s, cargo holds filled, and they would fly over at, I don't know, about 1,000 feet, I suppose. Nose up. The cargo was on rollers, went out.
Oh, okay,
the
I've
back.
seen that, yeah.
Yeah, and the chute would open, and these
pallets
of supplies, yes,
would come out, yeah.
Ammo and stuff like that.
Yeah, they would. It was more or less like a touch and go landing. They wouldn't even.
They didn't
wouldn't
land.
even touch.
This was entirely at altitude.
I remember seeing that. I mean, I was pretty impressed by it. I mean, you have to have a lot of training to do that. You know, where you just land. I've seen it with C-130s where the pallet would come out with the chute.
Right. Yeah. So I guess they were probably at 500 to 1,000 feet, when probably a same altitude that they dropped the troops from, and those combat jumps were pretty low.
Yeah.
So,
when you went out, did you get briefed every day, or did?
It depended on what was happening. Some of it was quite routine, or if we had
routine like ash and trash run.
Well, there was that. If you're taking somebody on R&R and dropping them off at Tansanut Air Base or something like that. But there were also things called command and control, where a commander would fly with you, and he would maintain control of his unit and stay on his map from the aircraft. And he had his radios.
He got medals for doing that.
In any event, there was a lot of that, and that could be boring as all get out, or it could be absolutely crazy, depending on what was happening that particular day.
So how many people would you say took pot shots at you?
Well, I tried to keep count, and I only got up to 14.
But
that's the ones I knew about, you know. As I say, there are others you don't know about.
Yeah, because you're flying over and they're shooting them from behind.
Yeah, and one of the guys I flew with was out one day, and he saw some traces up ahead, and he said, oh, some poor guy's getting shot at up there. And then he realized the traces were very close, and he was the poor guy who was on the receiving end. So I think he took evasive action.
Exactly. So what was your call sign? Everybody has
I was Outcast 4.
Outcast 4, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why they called you the Outcast.
Yeah, and vice versa. I mean.
Yeah. So who was Outcast 1?
Oh, I don't have everybody memorized by their number, but in any unit, 6 would be the commander of the unit.
Okay. So our call sign was Vacant College 6.
Vacant College
6, right? So.
Well, 6 would have been the commander of that unit.
Right, and then I think the radio operator would be Vacant College 6A or something like that, if I remember.
Because you were working with the commander.
That's correct. Yeah. There's a pecking order here that people have to know. But in regards to, did you have a top secret clearance or secret clearance or?
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Nothing I'm aware of.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, they would have told you, and it would have
Yeah.
been in your orders or your record that you had a confidential or top secret, because you were on the radio. I mean, giving information, and that was kind of
Yeah, you had procedures for that.
frequencies that you had to click on.
And enemy locations were always given in the clear, no code.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because the enemy knew where he was.
Yeah.
So you weren't giving anything away if you told that.
Right.
And but troop locations would be usually given from checkpoints.
American troop locations.
Yeah, like 200 meters south of checkpoint Bravo or something.
Right.
So we weren't telling.
Checkpoint wasn't a name like pineapple or apple. Or,
Yeah, they could
or
have it
they
that
could
way,
have
or
it,
numbers or letters.
Yeah, right.
They just put it on the map, and everybody knew where that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Till somebody got a hold of the enemy got a hold of the map, and then they knew.
Yeah. Well, supposedly things were supposed to change, and I mean, if you take we would have little course sections on radio procedures, and there's a manual called an SOI, Signal Operation Instructions, and that outlines what you're supposed to do. But supposedly, if you look at the ideal situation, call signs were supposed to change all the time.
Right.
To keep the enemy befuddled.
That's right.
But they didn't do it in Vietnam. They just kept the same call signs.
Yeah, it's really funny. You learn certain procedures in regards to changing over codes and every 12 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
And they just didn't care. They lit fires. You could see fires and things you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
That you learn that you don't start a fire and so forth where it could be visible.
Yeah.
Or smoke a cigarette. Supposedly a cigarette could be seen for 10 miles if you inhale it. The enemy can see it in nighttime, and so you have to be careful. But that was thrown aside. There was no...
Yeah, the discipline on that stuff was a little lax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's how you were trained, though.
Yeah.
That type of thing, and so.
There was a curious thing. So in our places, we call them hooches, where we slept at night, and there was that mortar attack where we had one individual killed in our unit, and so there was an interest in digging good bunkers, because the Army didn't provide bunkers necessarily. So the guys were digging their own bunker. And somebody would go scrounge some railroad ties, and that would become the roof, and that would be covered over with sand, and it would be dug deeply, So we had this pretty darn good bunker, which was right between two of the hooches. Either hooch could run out and be right into it in an instant with almost no exposure outside. And this one particular occasion, we had this 122 millimeter Russian rocket land right on the flight line. About 50, 75.
That could do damage.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, when one of those goes off, you know it. Well, we're all sort of struggling, trying to get our stuff that we want to carry with us, like we might want a flak jacket, we'll probably want our pistol with us.
Yeah.
And this one of our pilots, he said, "Okay, turn off the lights," because...
That's a good idea.
Because we don't want to give them an aiming point. Well, there might have been 10 other hooches that had their lights on, so what could it do that we turned off ours? The other thing was, I forgot to mention, that we had a light in the bunker, but that was operated from the hooch by plugging it in.
I see.
And so we, all struggling around in the dark because we didn't have any light on, got down into the bunker, and the light was on in the bunker. And the reason for that was that every single one of us had gone by to make sure that light was on before we went down.
I have less than a minute. When did you become a first lieutenant in Vietnam?
About halfway through my tour. Just the color of the bar, that's all it changed.
Yeah, that's all it changed. But there's a difference between, a yellow bar and a silver bar.
The pay grade is better.
Yeah, the pay grade, but time and grade and so forth. And you got extra money for flying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh,
Richard. I
good
appreciate you.
to be with you, Dean.